Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're taking a look at, well, at least we are in Canada. This is by a channel called How Money Works. I'm making this video because I figure the last video on topic, Canadian reacts to how Tim Hortons ruined its brand. Pretty popular video on my channel, had a lot of feedback on that. So I'm figuring you guys like that type of content, so I figure I'll make a little bit more of it here. So I've watched about 20 seconds of this video, and it seems pretty legit, so I figure why not give it a watch and can see what we think about it then, eh? So yeah, without any further ado, I'll leave the link to this video in the description, and maybe in the comments as well, so you can go check it out yourself. But without any further ado, let's get right into it.
Covering business, finance, and economics every week can be a little bit depressing. In just the last 2 years, personal savings have been evaporated, consumer debt has hit record highs, the job market has been defined by anti-worker trends such as ghost jobs, broad sector layoffs, and gigification, all while asset prices have ballooned far faster than household incomes or even their intrinsic fundamentals. The results have been pretty simple. It's getting much harder for people who work for a living to keep up with those who already have assets. Even the most diligent and career-focused people are finding it tough to make ends meet, let alone accumulate assets so that they too can one day achieve financial security. But even if you are feeling it's all a bit hopeless, just remember, it could be worse. You could be from Canada.
Yeah.
I feel trapped. It's saying house prices in Vancouver are expected to rise, get back to the peak where they were at 2 years ago.
Landlord.
And to that point, yeah, this was the fact even a couple years ago now. I think out of the top 10 most expensive places to live in the world, like number 5 is Toronto and number 2 is BC. Let me know if that changed, but I know, like Vancouver, BC, I should say. I don't know if that changed. Maybe it did, but I know for a lot of years, that's unironically how it was. For some reason, you know, we have some of the most space, one of the biggest countries in the world, and we have literally no living space at all at the same time. It's crazy, you know. But I just want to add that in. Let's just see where this goes.
Did pay for her to live in a motel for a short period of time, but that has ended. She says her only option was to move into her shed.
There's no place else you can afford to live.
As Canadian students head back to school, a growing number are still trying to find work.
The latest U.S. Census data shows in 2022, more than 126,000 people moved from Canada to the United States.
Yeah.
Okay, so a big problem across the world right now are
And that's another thing too. I know a lot of people in Canada that are not proud to be Canadians anymore and do wish to live in the US instead. And I can't really blame them. You know, the cost of living here is insane. There's, you know, it's nearly impossible to get anywhere in this country anymore, especially with, you know, how little our money is worth now. Due to inflation and due to the overspending of the current government, in my opinion. I'm not trying to get mega political on this, you know, but it's hard to find many people in Canada nowadays that support the current government. I personally didn't ever, but that's just me. But let's continue.
figures like GDP, stock market prices, and unemployment numbers that look really, really good, but don't actually help out the people whose incomes have not kept up with productivity, don't own stock, and are working 4 of the new jobs that have been created and are still struggling with bills. But in Canada, not even the big picture numbers look good anymore. GDP growth has been sluggish, and because of population growth driven by high levels of immigration, GDP per capita hasn't really improved at all over the last 10 years. Unemployment is also higher than in America, and average annual wages are far lower. However, there is one area where they have a commanding lead over the USA, and that's average home prices. The average Canadian earns less, and has to pay much more for a place to live, making one of the biggest problems in the world right now far worse for our...
So that's another thing too, like, I know around the area I live in Ontario, and you can't find a home for under $500,000 anymore. It's just not possible. But more than likely, you're looking between $400,000 to $800,000 for just a basic family home, you know. And it's crazy. There's no way that's affordable for anybody my age or even people twice my age. Like, that's just hardly affordable. You can't get a mortgage on a $700,000 home. You know, the average person can't. It's just not possible. So yeah, this graph is accurate, I would say, um, at least in terms of like a comparison. Again, I don't know if the numbers are necessarily right because, again, most houses I see much higher price than $350,000, but let's see where it goes.
Our northern brothers. Now, Canada's biggest exports have always been natural resources, manufactured goods, and YouTube videos about how f***ed up their housing market is. So this probably doesn't need to be said again, except that a lot of this is missing a much more important problem. This is probably going to be shocking to you, but America has an unaffordable housing problem too, and so does most of the developed world.
Yeah.
But Canada is still a little bit different. Comparing the price of real estate worldwide is actually incredibly difficult, because a city like Tokyo is certainly more expensive per square foot than San Francisco. But there are also a lot more small budget friendly-ish apartments for regular people to live in. Which is why, even though it looks almost twice as expensive, the city has been praised for its housing affordability. Here in the United States of urban sprawl, our average dwelling might be more expensive, but it's also a lot larger. So, if you can afford a home, it's probably going to be more comfortable than a similarly priced dwelling in more compact cities.
Okay.
Anyway, a city like Vancouver is
Like, that makes a lot of
probably the
sense.
same as a city like Seattle. They have a similar population, similar cultural preferences for freestanding homes spread out around a
Yep.
business district, and they are even relatively close to one another. The price of the average home in the Vancouver metropolitan area is slightly
I feel like this is going to be crazy. This is just my assumption, but let's see what he
more
has to say.
expensive than the average in Seattle. But Seattle has a median household income more than twice as high as Vancouver.
Yeah.
Thanks largely to big tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon, which have their global headquarters in the city, as well as dozens of other major tech companies and supporting firms which have big offices there as well. These companies employ lots of people in very well compensated roles, so they have pushed up the price of real estate in places like San Francisco, New York, and Seattle. As someone who has personally moved to one of these cities to work one of these jobs myself, I am well aware of the problems they cause for locals who can't afford to live in their own homes, but it does at the very least make sense. People with good jobs can afford to pay higher rents, and since those high-paying jobs are only really available in a few cities, they become very expensive. In the States, real estate prices have been driven by a few concentrated industries, but in Canada, real estate is the industry. According to a report by the OECD, real estate in Canada contributed 40% of its capital investment. The USA, by comparison, was only 20%. Hilariously, this statistic was proudly reported on by the country's largest real estate agency in a post they made this time last year.
I don't get it. Why are they confessing?
They're not confessing. They're bragging.
Vancouver doesn't have the same availability of jobs where young professionals can make life-changing amounts of money before they are 30 and then
Yeah.
move out. It's large.
And to that point, like as he says, right, like when the cost is the exact same almost, and it's not the exact same obviously, but when your dollar is 30 cents less than the American dollar and you're making $40,000 less than the average paying job in Seattle, I think that has a big thing to do with it as well. I know he kind of touched on that a little bit, but like, you know, like $100,000 American is going to get you a lot farther than $100,000 Canadian. It's about, you know, probably be about $60,000 to $70,000 is what you're getting after tax. So, you know, especially like the spending power itself too, because our money is just worth less. So not only do we get taxed more, but you know, our money is just 70 cents to the dollar. So it's pretty awful. But let's keep going.
Actually a regular city for regular people with opportunities that are not particularly remarkable. To put it another way, nobody is moving to Vancouver to try to get ahead financially like they are in Seattle.
No,
And the data backs
absolutely
this up
not.
as well. According to the most recent census data from both of these cities, the average age of someone living in Vancouver was 4 years older than someone living in Seattle. This just makes all the problems people are facing a lot worse, because if you live in these cities, your financial situation is not defined by your income or even how financially responsible you are. It depends almost entirely on if you own a home or not. A renter who is a highly skilled professional with diligent savings and an investment plan is going to be financially crushed by someone with an average income and no financial discipline, simply because rent is so high and houses make more money than their inhabitants. Now again, the Canadian real estate market is fucked up. You don't need me to tell you that, but a lot of people leave it as just that. But hot take alert.
Nice.
Expensive real estate estate is not a problem if incomes keep up with prices. Homes in West Virginia seem cheap to Californians, but they would be very expensive to someone living in Bangladesh because of the income differences between these areas. So while it's not as fun as opening up Zillow north of the border and doing some sweejack face to a derelict home that costs more than I will ever make in my lifetime, we do need to dig a little bit deeper. What is actually important in Canada is understanding.
Let's go back to that for a second. Like, do you see that number? That's fucking crazy. So, man, you 5-bed, 4 baths, 3,000 square foot. It's a decent sized home. You know, like normally you're getting a 3-bed, 2-bath if you're lucky. But look at the fucking price of that. $5 million. Like, holy fucking shit. Who's buying that? Like, that's fucking insane. There's no way, like nobody is gonna be paying that. Like, it's crazy. There's maybe 1% of Canada's population that can afford a place like that, and that's just the average cost down there. It's insane.
Let's dig a little bit deeper. What is actually important in Canada is understanding how it actually got this bad without the household incomes to support it, and what the actual long-term consequences are of this mess. Even for the homeowners, this is not a great situation to be in. So it's time to learn how money works to find out what the they are doing in America's hat. This week's video is sponsored by Delete Me. Delete Me is a hands-free service that helps you remove your personal information from data broker websites. These brokers collect and sell your data. Things like your name, address.
I'm going to leave the ad in here because I want to be fair to him, but I'm probably going to add a timestamp. So if you guys want to skip the advertisement, feel free to go for that, okay? No shame in it. I'm going to watch it though because
I've been using Delete Me to protect my privacy and got a full report showing where my data was removed. It's a relief knowing my info isn't floating around online. And if you're worried about family, they've got plans to protect them too. Take control of your privacy by heading over to joindeleteme.com/HMW and use code HMW for 20% off. Links are in the description. So if it wasn't economic opportunity that made real estate in Canada so expensive, what was it? Well, there are actually 3 factors at play here. My friend Richard from the Plain Bagel actually did a great deep dive on exactly this problem last year. And as a Canadian financial professional, his insights on the topic are definitely worth hearing if you want a more in-depth analysis. The first reason is that
I'll keep him in mind,
Canada is
actually.
surprisingly concentrated. It's the second biggest country in the world, but most of its people live close to the southern border in just a small handful of cities. Those small cities are largely surrounded by lots of protected natural areas, which makes them lovely places to live. But it also means that when combined with very tight zoning regulations...
I'm going to add on to that, and it's no shade to anybody who lives down there, but they are nice places to live, kinda. But if you live in the city limits, like Niagara, I know it was showing there. I'm sure a lot of Canadians, if you're watching this, you've probably been to Niagara. It leaves a little bit to be desired. The American side's a lot nicer than our side, I'll say that much.
There just isn't that much place to build new houses, and our Canadian brothers seem to be even more resistant to medium density housing than we are. The second reason is that Canada never really experienced the housing shock of 2008. Their financial sector was a little less jacked to its tits than ours, and they were helped a lot by resource exports to China, so as American real estate was experiencing a massive reset, Canadian property prices barely budged, and any losses were made back within just a few months. This meant that their homes stayed relatively expensive, and investors never got rattled like they did in America, where many people lost everything and became very wary about going all in on real estate again. The third reason is simply immigration. Canada welcomes about 1/5 as many immigrants into the country every year as the USA, but we have 8 times the population and a lot more cities to take everybody, and even some of the most pro-immigration pundits are admitting that even we are having problems. In Canada, migration is also a little...
Again, not to get too political, but that is also, yes, a very big issue we're having here, where we already have such limited housing and such limited housing available that when we're bringing in, 200 to 400,000 people a year, it's basically the case of where do they go. So in Canada's instance, a lot of hotels and whatnot have been rented out to these people, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, and it's gone either okay or very much not okay, depending on, I guess, the circumstances surrounding it, Again, I'm not trying to get too political here. It's kind of hard not to, in a sense. But I know plenty of immigrants that moved here 20 years ago, for example, and they're just as displeased as what's happening now in our country with our current immigration policy. So it's not immigrants is the problem. It's simply how we're handling it, and we're handling it very badly and have been, in my opinion. Let's keep going here, though.
A little bit different, because a higher share of new arrivals are already relatively wealthy people moving to the country who come through skilled or student visa programs. For some of these people, the job opportunities in Canada are entirely secondary to its political stability, safe environment, and strong property rights. A home in Canada is a very safe way to park money in a country that has its problems, to be fair, but is still relatively safe compared to some countries where people feel like the government could seize their wealth at any given moment. This has led to a strategy.
And again, I wouldn't even, again, not trying to get too political, but Canada's government has proven a couple times that it can do that and will do that. So that's, you know, it's not necessarily incorrect, but it's not necessarily correct either. What he just said there is what I'll say from personal experience, okay? So it is what it is, but you know, the government does withhold the right to seize bank accounts. They've done that plenty of times, so just keep that in mind, you know?
Known as land banking, where people will get a family member with a visa of some sort, often just a student residency, to buy a property purely as a safe store of value. Now, to be fair, the Canadian government is aware of this, and they have implemented new taxes on vacant dwellings, but it remains a popular way for people to keep their money safe, especially since people have figured out creative strategies for avoiding this tax anyway. For others, it's a lot easier to get a skilled worker visa in Canada than it is in the US.
Yeah.
So even if jobs don't
much
pay as well
easier
up there, they pay a lot better than similar work in developing countries. Now, this immigration has been used to help support an aging population and fill in skill gaps that existing Canadians just aren't paid enough to do. But it's been seen by investors as further proof that buying real estate is always going to be a safe bet because the government needs to bring more people into the country to keep things working. Now, this is still only half the problem, but it does impact the other half as well. Canadians love investing in housing, but it's been so good that they haven't been as excited about investing in anything else. And when they do invest in actual businesses that generate cash flow, US-based companies have been more attractive than their own homegrown businesses. The entire combined...
That's also very true. I've been saying for years in Canada, we have what's called a massive brain drain. And that's the case of people come here to Canada to get an education, so to get your university or college. And then the instant you get that degree, you skip the country, basically, and move to America because they simply just pay you more, right? So, like, a lot of education here is subsidized, even for foreign, students, I guess. So even if you're a foreign student, a lot of that is still subsidized. You get the, get your degree and you just leave. There's no reason for you to stay because you're going to be getting paid 2/3 of what you should be, and it's the same thing with opening up companies. Like if you have money and you're looking to open a company, zero reason to do it in Canada. You're going to be paying twice the production cost. There's no reason to do it, at the end of the day. It's sad, but it's completely true.
And market capitalization of the biggest listed companies in Canada is less than Apple, Microsoft, or Nvidia individually. This is why Canadian companies can't pay as well as the big American companies. And this also means that a lot of talent leaves Canada to get better paying jobs here.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have the choice between living in Toronto, where the average house costs 4 times as much as the average in Houston, and
literally
more money down in Texas,
literally,
which would you choose?
Literally. That's exactly it.
If you are Canadian, leave a comment down below.
Okay, I'll answer it right here. Absolutely, I would move. I've looked at house prices in the U.S. and it's insane. You can pay $500 a month and live in a fucking 2-bedroom house, 2-bedroom, 1 bath. That's perfect. $500 a month. The same thing here would cost you literally $1,500 a month. It's not even comparable, the cost of living. It's fucking insane. It's bonkers. But yeah, he's totally right.
Pull here. Either way, hundreds of thousands of mostly
totally right
Canadians are making that move every year.
Yeah.
Making the country
I wish. I wish.
On immigration to avoid catastrophe. Even outside of attracting financing, starting a business is much harder in Canada because of generally less business-friendly regulations, a smaller domestic market, less talent, and the fact that commercial real estate is expensive too.
Oh, it's so expensive. And to add on that point, like in Canada, you're gate kept out of basically everything, man. Like the cost to get into any sort of industry, whether it be, you know, even hairdressing, something as simple as that, the cost to actually get into it is fucking nuts. Like, because you have to be licensed, you have to get all these government clearances. It's crazy, you know. It's the same thing with like the marijuana business, for example, right? They opened it up to the average, you know, person to do, but you know, you need to spend at least 10 grand a year to keep it functional, you know. And that's just your base like licensing costs. That's not even like your operating costs or anything else. That's just straight money to the government. So if you want to promote businesses, I think the easiest way to do that is to, you know, simply reduce the amount of government legislation that you need, or government licensing that you need to actually get into these businesses. And I think a lot of Canadians would start opening up their own businesses again here, but I don't see that happening because the government needs money. We've been deficiting so much for so many years and we're not getting any back. So I don't see them wanting to give away more, kind of thing.
For example, that a real estate problem can become an everything problem, and it can be hard to realize this until it's too late. Slowly letting down this house of cards without blowing up record levels of household debt is potentially going to last decades. Already, people are struggling because almost all mortgages in Canada are given on adjustable rates, which means that as rates have increased to combat inflation, the rates people are paying on their mortgages have also gone up considerably.
Yeah.
Even if they originally took on the mortgage when rates were low. Some mortgage repayments have doubled or tripled in the last 4 years, making it hard for a lot of families to afford much else besides the roof over their head.
And on that point, like a big cause of that was the COVID pandemic. I know a lot of people who bought houses because it looked like they were getting cheaper during that time, and the interest rates went down. But then, you know, right after COVID, everything just spiked right back up again. And a lot of these people weren't able to make their payments on their houses, and they straight up lost their houses only a couple of years after they actually bought them. So yeah, that's also a correct statistic, I would say.
So yeah, Canada might make you feel better, but don't get too smug just yet. Here in America, we are not too far behind, and our lending standards are not as robust as Canada's. Canada is keeping their housing market afloat with the immigration fire hose. We are doing it with 1% down payment mortgages and corporate real estate investments. Our incomes may on average be higher, but that's pulled up by a lot of few extremely high-income earners in the concentrated industries that have made places like Seattle and San Francisco into what they are today. Unaffordable, gentrified hellscapes. The
Pretty much.
in Canada for the people most hurt by unaffordable housing is higher, assuming they can find a job. Now, if you are Canadian and these videos got you feeling a bit depressed, just remember it could be worse. You could be Australia. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see us cover that cluster.
True. Nice.
I have put together a brief 1-hour collection of all these problems in basically every housing market around the world. It's on a new channel that I have made that collates topics like this and turns them into extended videos without ad breaks, which hopefully might be a nicer way to watch some old videos for some of you.
Wow.
So make sure to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.
How money works, yeah. So that's the name of the channel there. That was a pretty good video. It was pretty in-depth. I don't, 100% agree with absolutely everything you said, but most of it, I'd say a solid 90% is pretty on the money there. Pretty good channel. I'm actually going to subscribe because I am actually genuinely interested in that Australia video that he puts out, if he's going to put that out, because I think that'd be funny to see, just like the comparison there. Mostly he was talking about the housing market, it seems like, here in Canada. Obviously there's quite a few reasons why we are the way that we are right now. And it's not just the housing market, but the housing market is obviously a very, very big part of it. But yeah, if you guys like this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and go check out his video, Well, At Least We Aren't Canada, by How Many Works. Please go check him out, leave a like on his video, and if you found his video interesting, please go subscribe to him. I thought it was pretty in-depth, and I thought it was very good. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, boys.